Thanks for joining us for Through Their Eyes, Season 4. This is Episode 2, and we have another opportunity to look at the Minister Files. We decided to call this season the Minister Files because we wanted to sit down with preachers and ministers and kind of pick their brain on certain subjects. One of our teachers at the Memphis School of Preaching, Brother Garland Elkins, was quoted as having said on more than one occasion, "I believe the biggest room in my life is the room for improvement." And certainly neither of us at this table, none of us would say that we have arrived, that we are the greatest there is at this particular subject. But there's something to be gained from someone who has been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, and even returned it for a refund if they needed to get a different size. So we want to kind of do that today and have the opportunity to look at the subject of balancing church family life. As always, I'm Michael Clark, the Director of Operations at the Scattered Abroad Network. I have with me to my right, your left, Wayne Rogers, the Director of Programming. Doesn't really matter where he is sitting in your location, but I like to say that anyway. And we're in the House to House studios, which is a wonderful blessing. This studio is providing a lot of content for those that are looking to try to study more. The Sisters podcast is a great one to check out. Make It Plain and others are also recorded here. It's highly worth your time to consider finding an opportunity to study further by watching or listening as you do your regular chores and your regular activities. But the guest of the half hour is Brother Chad Dollahite from the Bremen Church of Christ in Bremen, Georgia. Chad, go ahead and introduce yourself. Thanks for joining us.
Well, you said most of it. I'm from Bremen, Georgia.
Yeah.
Been there for going on 12 years, and we're very blessed to be there. Great congregation, and I have a wife, Reagan, and we just celebrated 22 years, and we have 7 children. We also have, as of December, a daughter-in-law. So
Yeah.
Kind of 12 going on 13. But we have 7 children, ranging from 20 all the way down to 7 years old. And So we have our hands full, but
Sure.
it's a blessing. And I'm very, very grateful for the invitation to be with you guys today.
Well, when we were putting together the schedule and we knew we wanted to talk about balancing church family life, we knew we needed somebody that had been in the congregation longer than just a few years, because you really can't say that you've done a good job with that if you've only been there for 3, maybe 4 years. It's tough. Balancing church family life, to me, is a testament of someone who's been there for longer than 5 years or 5 years and longer, because you have put down some roots. The congregation knows you. They understand who you are. They know that you love them and that they love you. But anybody that gets past that 10-year mark is either special or the congregation that hired him is crazy. So I'm going to choose to say you're special because I know you. But I think we've also probably known some that we look back and go, maybe they were just crazy for doing that. So Chad, the idea that you've been at Bremen for 12 years, naturally, when you think about 12 years, that is a lifetime in a lot of ways, because you have seen people with children being born. You've seen people laying their loved ones to their final resting place on this earth. You've seen those that have unexpectedly died, those that have been expected to pass away. Maybe they made a miraculous recovery, it seemed like, and they're doing better. And all. You've seen every little nook and cranny of ministry that you can possibly see at a congregation for 12 plus years. So how difficult is it to balance the church family life with visitations, hospital prayers before procedures, loss of loved ones, Bible studies, and all other applicable church events? Because when I was in local work, I remember thinking sometimes, how am I going to be at the Sweetheart Banquet Friday night, the youth event Saturday afternoon, this young at heart dinner Sunday evening for these people? How is all that going to fit into my schedule? But I know I need to be there, make an appearance. So how difficult is it to balance all of that as a minister?
It depends on when you ask me that.
Yeah, no pressure, right?
If you ask me that during a busy time, I might say it's impossible.
Yeah.
And there are busy periods, there are slower periods. Everybody, I always tell everybody, summer, it's crazy. I mean, it's just there's so much going on. But and some of that was trial by fire, because we moved to Bremen, 150, 170 members or so. We first started going there from a 50-member congregation.
Sure.
So there was a lot more going on to try to balance. Some of it is, I've learned some things. I take my children with me.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of hospital visits, you have to use some discretion with that. Sometimes, I remember it was just a few years ago, we had a member who was dying, literally. The wife called me and she said, the hospice nurse she's here and she tells us it's going to be any time now. Would you come and be with me? And her daughter was with her. She asked if I would come, and another guy that did a lot of visiting with me and his wife. And so I said, absolutely. Well, one of my children, I want to go because they had visited this brother with me before.
Mm-hmm.
I love Brother Bill. And I said, not today. It's just not a good time. So you have to use discretion, obviously.
Sure.
And sometimes ICU can be, restrictive toward children. But anytime I can take my children, I've learned it's kind of a bonus because, if somebody, especially if it's an older member and they're in the hospital and a child comes to see them, they love that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's, hey, I got a visit from my preacher and one of the kids in the congregation.
Yeah.
They love that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does take some finagling sometimes because it can be a lot and especially during those busy seasons. But that's one of the big things for me is I try to take my children with me whenever I can.
Yeah.
It has helped us in homeschooling our children. Now we've had our children go through the third grade. That's the main little elementary school in Bremen. And then once they've finished the third grade, we'll start homeschooling. But as they get beyond third grade, if they want to go with me somewhere, if Dad's going on a trip, I hadn't seen Dad much lately because there've been a lot of people sick and he's been having to do this, having to do that. They'll go with me, and sometimes that has helped. But you do have to sort of get creative sometimes, and that's I think a lot of that helps having an eldership that will work with you. I've never had from the elders at Bremen say, you have got to be in the office these hours. And I told them when I sat down with them, and they agreed 100% before we ever came to work there. I said, look, bottom line with the preacher, if he's not putting in the study, you'll know it. The entire congregation will know it before long. But if he's going to do his work effectively, there's got to be some flexibility there.
Yeah.
And they said, absolutely, we're not setting any kind of office hours for you. We just want you to, we don't want you to go AWOL and be, missing in action if somebody needs you or whatever. And that's what I've told a lot of, younger preachers and even elders that have called, talked to me before. I think that's one of the biggest things as a preacher you can do is make sure people know where you are and how to reach you. And so I may be, hey, look, I haven't seen my kids much lately. I'm taking them camping. And this may be on a Tuesday night. They're out of school. It might be spring break, fall break. I'm going to take them on a camping trip. But I'll have my cell phone if some emergency comes up or whatever. And they're very good to respect my time. And they'll say, hey, we're not going to call Chad unless we really have to. But they know where I am.
Yeah.
So, they're just different things that you could do. And some of it, not to oversimplify, but developing close relationships, it feels sometimes less and less like you're balancing family and church and like it's all just that big family, with the understanding, obviously, that there's a difference in your immediate family.
Right.
But, sometimes we've been through a death of an 18-year-old, a death of a 4-year-old, and those were times that it was just no question. You just drop what you're doing and you go. Yeah. And the kids understood it. The wife understood it. Everybody understands. Yeah. You drop everything and you go and just, you're there.
Yeah. True to what you said before I let Wayne ask something as well and chime in with his thoughts on what you talked about. In my work now, traveling and promoting the school and doing that, it is better when my family is with me doing that than when it is just me. Though a lot of times it has to just be me.
Yeah.
If my son can go with me, though, people love that. And they just absolutely love that there's a almost 7-year-old wreaking havoc in the foyer somewhere while I'm trying to discipline and raise mini Michael, who is giving me all my comeuppance that I deserve. They love seeing him. And when my daughter and my wife are with us as well, they love that. And so you're absolutely right. It's not that you're not enough as the minister, because certainly you would be, but there's something to be said about, man, that child has a lot of other things that mama and daddy could have thought was better for them to do, but they came to see me.
And I loved your dad's stories of you. I mean, when I would be places, and he would come and speak, and he would sometimes tell these stories about what Michael's been up to at the hotel. Yeah. And those were great, man. Yeah. I mean, they make for great entertaining stories. Yeah. And I've got a few of those myself that I've shared with people. Yeah, but about it's no, not about you, about my own children.
I've shared the other stories about you. So
I'm sure you have. It's all good. Can't trust anything.
But you're right. I mean, and there's a sister that passed not too long ago. Every time I'd go to see her, she was at a nursing home, and she always wanted to know, where's that little fella? Mm-hmm. And she could never remember his name, but she was talking about Noah, my 14-year-old. And she said, he's always smiling. She said, now next time you come, you bring him. And sometimes they'll say that, hey, why are you coming without Rachel? Why are you coming without Noah?
Bring the children.
They're looking around you and beyond you. Yeah.
That's always my joke is that like if I didn't have Reagan and the kids, I wouldn't be at Bremen. Right. I wouldn't be kept around Bremen.
That's like having grandchildren though. My mom and dad used to always ask Megan and I to come over. When are you bringing Megan over for dinner? And then we had Adam. And it wasn't, when are you guys coming over with Adam? It was, when's Adam coming?
Yeah.
And if we walked in and Adam's not with us, I'd be like, where's Adam? And I looked at mom one day, I was like, I'm your son. Like, you're supposed to love me too. And she laughs. But it's that idea, though, of there is something special about little children and having that opportunity to make that connection and friendship deepen and grow. It's a boost in the arm.
Well, even picking up a grandbaby now and standing at the back when people are coming out and just talking with everybody, just with the little baby, in your hand, stuff like that, but it's special. But, and I want to just reiterate this because I think you touched on it all. If your family, because you can't do ministry alone.
Oh, no.
And your family is a vital part of that. And you know that, and you've taught them that as well, so your children coming up, they understand about ministry. They understand about working in the kingdom, and you've done your part to teach them that, training the rest of the congregation in that, and you're being that example for them to be able to see that. And I think that's the key, because to me, when I think about, the church family life, the church is my family. I know I have my immediate family, but the church is my family, and I want them to be a part of my family and know my kids and to know my grandkids and know, my wife and to know me, to spend that time with me. And so, trying to find that, and I know that there's a healthy way to do that, healthy balance that we've got to strike to do that, because sometimes we need our family time, but we also need our church family time, as well. And so that, I think that's key, but I'm glad you hit that for sure. What does the Bible say regarding a balanced church family life? And I'm thinking about Acts chapter 2, and really the book of Acts, kind of shows this picture of the church growing, obviously, and seeing how people are in and out of, congregations and what's going on, and seeing especially the work of the early church right there in Acts chapter 2. Kind of talk about that a little bit, kind of set the stage for how that should be from a biblical precedent.
I think, and this, I see this sometimes. I won't say a lot. Maybe, I guess if I got around more, I could say a lot, but I do see it sometimes. And I think it's troubling is when preachers view preaching, the ministry, as a job. And understanding, I'm a full-time minister. And so in one sense it is.
Yeah.
But it's more than that. It has to be, because, we're all three of us Memphis graduates. You guys heard it, I'm sure, as much as I did. If you can do anything else other than preach, do it. And I've been there. I've been there when I was like Jeremiah, and I said, I'm done. I'm not going to do this anymore. And it was in me, and I couldn't not do it. But that goes a long way.
Yeah.
Because I've been on both sides of this. I've been in a congregation where I felt like I didn't have those close relationships. And I understand that can be a challenge. And I've sat where they sat as far as those situations. But boy, if you can, we sometimes talk about church discipline, and sometimes people will say, it doesn't work. Okay, why? What is the primary reason? Number one, it does work, obviously, because it's God's way. But if it doesn't work as we think it's going to, and what people mean by that sometimes is, well, they didn't come back.
Right.
Well, sometimes they're not, but it still works. But my point is, a lot of times why it's not working is because there's no close relationships there.
Right.
I have said numerous times, especially in the last few years, as we've really gotten those roots, as Michael mentioned, and really put down those develop those strong ties at Bremen. If God forbid I did something that the church there had to withdraw fellowship from me, I don't know what I would do. I mean, I wouldn't, other than my immediate family, wouldn't have a whole lot of people within like 50 to 100 miles even to associate much with. I mean, it would be that devastating to me.
Right.
And that's what you see in Acts 2.
Yeah.
You see that closeness. They've got all things common. Somebody needs something. They, people do all kind of crazy things with this and try to, Acts 2, Acts 4, and try to turn it into communism or something. It's just people helping people.
Right.
It's people that, though they're not related by blood, they are related by a different sense of blood, the blood of Christ.
Yeah.
And they're all in, and they're going to help each other. They're there for one another. They love each other. And it's that common bond in Christ. I love that song. For years, we ended our McCroy Bible camp up in Tennessee. The last thing we did before we closed with a prayer, but right before the prayer, we would sing A Common Love. And it's just, it's a powerful song. It's very simple, but man, it's so powerful.
Yeah.
And when you have those ties, it's family. And that's what you see with that early church.
Yeah.
They were going to take care of each other, and they faced their problems. I mean, you see that in Acts chapter 6.
Right.
And so the apostles say, hey, we're going to deal with this. We got to give our attention to continuing to spread the word. So they appoint these special servants that deal with that. But yeah, it's what you see in the New Testament pattern.
Yeah.
That closeness.
It puts into perspective the idea that what some church bulletins will say, and I'm not about to suggest that if the church bulletin where we worship or where those watching or listening worship doesn't have this, that pack it up and go home, you're not a Church of Christ. But I've seen on bulletins before, evangelist, for example, Michael Clark, ministers, all members.
Yeah.
And that's what you see in Acts 2, 42 through 47, and something that we've talked about, before, I know in our church work, is the understanding that this was something that no one had to be convinced to do. No one had to be, and I thought about it one day. When you think about the culture that most of these people would have come from, many of them coming from, this one way of living for the Lord, and they leave all that behind. Is it impossible to wonder and realize and even speculate with some contextual understanding that there were families that rejected those people who followed God that day? That there were loved ones and spouses that said, I can't believe you would do this. This is not the way. Yeah. And yet all they had is what you just said a second ago. I don't know what I would do if I lost Bremen. They don't know what they would do if they lost each other. And there was that action of knowing, this is my family. And there was nobody twisting an arm and saying, we got to go do this. We have to do that. I had somebody ask me once, why do we do Wednesday night services? It's not in the Bible. I said, you know what? You're absolutely right. Would you read Acts 2:46? And they pulled out their Bible and they read it. So continuing daily with one accord in the temple and breaking bread from house to house, they ate their food with gladness and simplicity of heart. I said, you're spot on. I'll see you tomorrow. And they just kind of looked at me funny. And I said, we're not even doing what they did. And in a lot of ways, though, we do have church programs and we do have things that are set up where we have almost daily things. And certainly I understand and would not disagree with anybody that suggests I think God understands the schedule that people have may not be conducive to having something every single day.
Right.
But there is something to be said about the fact that if we compromise in some of these things that we are capable of doing, then we're not going to ever be what they were. Because if we don't do what they did, we can't be what they were. And looking at this family that they had with each other, that was daily having people brought into it, added to the body of Christ. What a time that must have been to be alive. And I've heard preachers say this before, but imagine if we took one family from this group and brought them to the church today. What would their review be of us? What would they say? Would they be giving us a letter, so to speak, like Paul would have to write, or like Jesus wrote to those 7 churches and say, we cannot believe that you're not doing X, Y, Z? Would they even say this is a church of Christ? We've all had an experience. I think, it's not hard to imagine that we've gone to a church that may have the name outside on the sign, but then we got inside and we realized this is not it. Well, would that be their, review of us? I think that's a scary thought. Mm-hmm. And it's a scary thought that means balancing church family life is important, because if we don't love each other, how will anybody else want to love God? Because if God brings us together and shows us a better path, these people just left behind everything they'd ever known. And I don't think we talk about that as much as we should, that what they were raised and taught, they abandoned that day. And they never went back to it if they stayed steadfast, as we're told in Acts 2:42 they were doing. That's a huge jump. And yet we see people today that are in the same boat with denominationalism, where they're raised in it. And then we sit down and ask them to leave everything they've ever known and been taught. And then they do. And how many times is this what ends up happening? They become New Testament Christians and they ain't got a family after they do it.
Kind of like Brother Billy Bland used to tell us about the plane coming in from the south. And he says, request permission to land. I said, hey, you're clear on runway 1. And another guy radios, he's coming in from the north. Permission granted, runway 1. He said, didn't you tell the guy coming from the south he can land on runway 1? He says, yeah, y'all take care now.
Yeah, that's it.
That's sometimes how we do Christians. Yeah. Y'all take care.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Welcome to the family. Take care.
Yeah. Good luck.
We'll see when we need a class teacher.
See you Sunday.
And we wonder, do you remember Brother Bland? I think it was Brother Bland. Maybe it was another person. I'm pretty sure it's Brother Bland that said, and we're getting in trouble here because they said, don't quote us, but I think it was Brother Bland that said, a lot of us walk around like we were baptized in pickle juice. And we look so angry and so mad all the time. And then when people from the outside see that, they don't see a family. They don't see something that they want. But we sing, we're part of a family that's been born again. And sometimes we laugh together. Sometimes we sing. Sometimes we cry. Well, apparently also sometimes we get together and do some things every now and then. And that's the problem.
Sometimes.
Sometimes we'll do that. I like you every now and then. If there's a fellowship meal, I'll see you there. But other than that, get in your own lane. I've got things to do. And as much as it could be said this way, that the holidays can sometimes be a twisting of the arm to get everybody to come back home for the holidays. Once you're there, whether there's some problems and the typical types of things that happen with holiday get-togethers, once you're there, you are thankful that you're there.
Oh, yeah.
And if we can't cultivate that in the church, we're not going to have verse 47 happening today. And perhaps, as scary as it might be, perhaps one of the reasons that we see denominationals having daily growth, it seems, is because there's more of a family environment that people are craving. And we don't provide that as well as we could.
We have a very recent convert. I'm talking within probably 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
This fella and his wife they were denominational. I mean, through and through. They moved into the city. Everybody raves about the school system there. And so they went to the big denominational church up the road. He said, it just didn't feel like home. Just didn't quite feel a connection. They decided to come visit at Bremen. I think VBS.
Mm-hmm. And
their child liked VBS, so they decided, let's start. They liked it. They said, everybody was nice to us, and we liked it. So they started. Well, then they approached me or the elders or all of us maybe, and hey, we want to join the church. So, well, let's talk about that. And so the elders began to study with him. Guy obeys the gospel just very recently. So excited. And he, within about a week, loses his mother. She'd been in failing health, but kind of took a turn for the worse. But I'm talking to him just recently, and he says, man, you wouldn't believe how many people have sent me cards. They're reaching out to me. He's like, I don't even know these people. Like, I'm the new guy.
Yeah.
But they're reaching out to me, and he's like, it's so great. He's like, I can't wait till Sunday. And that was one of the last things he says to me as we're hanging up. And then a couple of days passed. He called me and just had something on his mind and wanted to pick my brain about it and ask some spiritual advice, he says. And so we're talking about it, and he says, oh, thank you, Brother Chad. You've been real, real helpful. And he's like, I see you Wednesday, man. I can't wait. Can't wait for Wednesday. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there for Bible class. See you then. And he's just like so excited about it. And he's connected. One of my elders says all the time, Wayne knows Jimmy Adams, one of our elders, but Brother Jimmy will say all the time, we need to help people make connections because people who are connected don't quit.
That's right.
When you got a connection, I mean, you think about in the time of Paul and Jesus when he walked this earth, and statements that we just kind of breeze over sometimes in the New Testament. The Jews had already agreed if anybody confessed Christ, they're going to put them out of the synagogue. Mm-hmm. That was a social death sentence for them. You get put out of the synagogue, you don't have a social life. And that goes back to what I said, if I didn't have the church there at Bremen, I wouldn't really have a social life.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that because that's God's family, and that helps keep me in check, and it helps make sure I have that connection, and it helps, I think, to balance everything.
Yeah. What would keep us from wanting to be with each other? My wife and I, we don't get to see each other all the time with me being traveling. And, Wayne also would understand, sometimes when you're at the office, as I'm sure you understand, when you're doing some of the work, your wife's not with you. When it's time to go home, aren't you excited?
Oh, yeah.
And you can't wait to go home and get the kiss welcome home and the big hug and all that. You see the kids and they're all excited, with everything going the way that it is. How could I not be excited to want to wake up and go to church? And so I guess as we kind of bring this to a close, let me ask it this way. What are some pitfalls of a minister who does not believe in or prioritize a balanced approach to church family?
Oh, wow. How much time we got left?
2 minutes and 10 seconds.
Part 2.
I think probably, and especially we're talking balance. I say this all the time in preaching. Balance is one of the hardest things to maintain in life. And we tend toward extremes. The one extreme is you can take your children with you or try to include people so much that it can be, again, you can get in situations where it's just not wise. Mm-hmm. Or, somebody says, hey, he's always dragging his kids along. I don't think there's as much chance of that happening, but there are situations where it's just not best. But then the other extreme, I've seen where guys would just leave. Everything is separated. If I'm going to make a visit, if I'm going to go have a prayer before a procedure, if I'm going to go to a funeral, I wrestled with I think he was 8 or 9 at the time, son, when we had the funeral for the 18-year-old boy. You remember, you came down for that. And I wrestled with that. And I was talking to Brother Keith Moser on the phone about it, that just the night Tate had died. And I talked to him, and he said, I got to talking, and I was talking about when I was a child, probably about that age. My aunt died. They left me with a family friend. They all went to the funeral because my mom or dad or both felt like, man, maybe he's too young. He said, he just asked me a simple question. He said, well, how did you feel? How'd you feel in that situation? And I mean, I didn't even think. I just said, I felt left out. Mm-hmm. And he said, I think there's your answer. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes people try to exclude family from everything and try to compartmentalize church. And again, that's where you have to realize it's not just a job.
Right.
It's a calling. It's a part of you.
Yeah.
And so you try to separate that, and especially that interferes with their time with dad. Mm. And I've seen preachers grow up that had kids, or preachers' kids grow up and become bitter toward the church, toward the ministry, because we never saw Dad. And so it's imperative that we find that balance.
Right.
And the church will be better for it, and our families will be better for it.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I think about the worst moments of my life, the church was there, which means God was there.
Absolutely.
And that's the actual seeing it happen. You know, the old story of, I saw 2 sets of footprints and life was going great and I knew God was with me. And then I look back, life was pretty bad and there's only 1 set. And I was mad because God had abandoned me. And God says, I was carrying you. What are you talking about? You're crazy. Well, the church showing up, that's that visually capable of being able to say, there's God. That's exactly what God intended, was for them to come and be at my aid. And my wife and I will sometimes talk about things and I'll say, well, we had a problem. We're going to the church building up here up the road. One of our kids had an accident, threw up in the car or something like that. Honey, we're going to have to ask for their help. And she said, I don't want to do that. I said, this is what being in the church is about. When we have a need, when we have a problem, they come to our aid. That's and right. I don't ever want to be seen as too high and mighty to ask for that help. And she always will go, that's right. We don't need to do that. And it's just reminding us, because then I'll sometimes go, no, don't do that. And this is what the church is about. And it's that kick in the pants of, yeah, you're right. I need to be thinking God designed this for it to feel like family and be family.
Or even, I've had some of my kids sometimes, maybe they're a little reluctant. I say, come on, we need to do this. Mm-hmm. Daddy, I don't know what to say, especially if it's, maybe it's been a tragedy or something. Sure. I don't know what to say. I say, sweetie, that's okay.
Yeah.
You just be there. Mm-hmm. You don't know what just your presence does in those situations.
That's right. Wayne, you got anything else to add?
No, sir.
Imagine that.
No. I had to do it on purpose.
That's right. That's right.
I think Chad's nailed the idea of the church family, how important it is. And I think about those ones in Acts chapter 2, they when it talks about they sold their possessions and their lands and all that stuff, well, they did that so that they could stay together right there, right. And eventually, God had to bring a persecution to them, kind of get them scattered, a little bit. Okay, now you need to go out and preach the gospel somewhere else, y'all have overtaken Jerusalem, you got to move out, and, but anyway, but you see that picture, and I think that's what, when you think church family life, trying to bring it together in that standpoint, and we understand that. We just hope that it's a benefit to someone else to try to think of it in those terms, and maybe see it through our eyes in that way. I mean, that's the program. So I appreciate all that you brought to it.
Hey, thank you guys. I've enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening and watching. Those of you that watched us on YouTube, you can check out in the show notes on the podcast, as well as the description in the YouTube video, for all of our information, including the information that Brother Chad will give us for what he'd like to have known. But you can find our Linktree website, our Instagram and Facebook, Substack, where we write our blogs monthly. We also have the YouTube channel that, obviously, if you're watching this, hopefully you're on that and found us. You can subscribe to that. But then there's also our email address, san@msop.org. We are proudly a work of the Memphis School of Preaching. We are thankful that we have the opportunity to give back to all of the hard work that was put into to all of us at the network to teach us the gospel and train us to be gospel preachers and teach us how to preach that gospel. We're thankful for the opportunity that we have to be together right now, but don't forget Thursday, just a couple days from now, if you're watching this when it comes out, Chad will be back with us to be on an episode of Did That Really Happen? And this has all been recorded in the House to House studios. We're thankful to House for letting us be here. And until Thursday, take care and God bless.